what I want to do in this class is just kind of wrap up a few things. Maybe step back a bit from things a bit and just look at some of the main themes and some ideas, and also maybe talk about a few things that I should have got to and didn't. You know? So I think while I think blogs are still important, they're almost passé now. But I thought it was important to look at blogs because I think in blogging we can see the beginnings of lots of things we have now. Like I think the connections between blogs people had and the ability to have a conversation across multiple blogs with those backtracking and stuff, that in the beginnings of that I think we have kind of the Facebooks and things that we have now. You know? And so I think a lot of it goes back to the blogs. And the really important thing about the blogs was that anyone could publish. That's why they took off. Like, for you guys now, you think, okay, I mean, if I wanted to publish something, throw it together in HTML and put it up in a server somewhere, that's not a big deal. Do you know what I mean? But like, my mother was never going to do that. Do you know what I mean? Never, ever, you know. But she could conceivably have a blog. And so, while people talked about how powerful the web was and how democratizing it was that anybody could publish anything, well, it wasn't really anybody, was it? It was you know, people like us. And I mean, we're not representative by any means of I mean, God help the world if it was all like us in charge. You know? So blogs allowed anybody to publish, really anybody, and that's what was important about them. Which brings us then to content management systems in general, right? For large organizations now and large websites, or actually even small ones, you can have a content management system. So whereas you guys wrote up HTML from scratch, right? In a content management system, what you do is you'd write the HTML and the CSS for what a typical page would look like. Okay? But the actual content of the page is in a database somewhere, and that either dynamically gets pulled out and the page is generated on the spot and someone goes looking for it, or there's sort of a merging, you know, a process, and the page gets generated automatically. But if you take, say, a news story from the Irish Times, no one sat down, like no one got that news story in an email and then wrote the HTML page that had it in it. Someone decided, okay, a news story on, come in, if you can. Hello. Okay. So nobody writes that page from scratch. Some graphic designer has decided that's what a page on the Irish Times looks like. And then some journalist puts the information into a database, and then when it's time to publish the paper, it gets taken out of that database, gets merged with the HTML and the CSS, and we get the page that we have. And so that's a content management system. And there are a couple of those, like even if you had a small business, you could, oops, not that one. You know, there's a bunch of them. There's some even open source ones that are very popular. I think when this module was written, it was probably going to be all about content management systems. But at the end of the day, content management system, what it's doing is it's taking away the details of the HTML, and you put in the content, and then it can come out again somewhere else. So you don't have the style is usually predefined. So it's a bit like doing pages in Blogger or in Blogger. You actually have a lot more freedom than you would have in a regular content management system. So the reason all the CIT web pages look the same is not that people are very, very disciplined. It's that the style is defined and people can log in and change the content. So we could go in and change information about particular courses. But we don't go near the HTML or the CSS. And that content comes out and becomes published somehow. Okay. Back to the blogs and the content management systems in general. The fact that anyone can publish has had a huge impact on how conversations happen in our society, at least in societies that have those technologies. I think it might not be too great a stretch to say that you wouldn't have had Obama elected in a pre-internet era. Obviously, you can think back, or a pre-web era. The way he was able to use the internet to allow his supporters to communicate with each other and to, it allows people to organize and to have conversations that perhaps couldn't have had them before, couldn't have had a public conversation. So, it has implications for, it has implications for the kind of the powerful in society as well, because they used to have control over the media, and now they don't so much, and that freaks them out a bit. And, having something in the Irish Times may or may not be as important as having a video on YouTube. If you decided you wanted to run for, office or something, and you were just completely bonkers, and the Irish Times and the Examiner were ignoring you. But if everyone in Ireland has seen your YouTube video, they can't stop that. And so some of the reactions we have to the technologies are tied up a bit in that. Some of this, the internet is terrible, there's all this bullying, everyone's downloading movies, no one's paying for songs, it's the end of civilization. In some respects, it is the end of civilization for those people, because they had all the power, they had control of everything, and now it's gone from them. And that's incredibly powerful. And no one is quite clear yet how all that is going to pan out. Like people your age, we call them digital natives. You'd be the first generation that has grown up with this being normal. So even for people my age, even if you look in this department, a department of computing lecturers, very few of them actually use the internet, really. And they're, the most capable people in the society doing that, and they wouldn't be doing it. So you're the first people for whom that's natural. And no one's quite clear how that's going to pan out. Like when I was in college, if there was an article you were interested in, you filled out a card, you sent it to the library, and a photocopy came back in about 2 weeks. And that seems slow, but actually if the web was around when I was in college, I wouldn't have graduated. I was screwed. I was so easily distracted, like yourself. So no one is quite clear how all that's going to work out. One of the things that we should have covered in this module is social media, but I don't know if there's anything I could tell you about social media. What do you mean? Maybe you could give classes to old people about social media. And there's even you see in social media as well, you can set up the platform and you can set up the technology without having any idea how it's going to pan out, or without having any idea what cultures might build around it. Do you mean? So there are sort of things you do in social media that have have developed as part of the culture that only happen in social. I mean, a like, for example, you know, has become a thing, you know. And that might, you know, someone might have just had an idea one day in Facebook, you know, oh, we could do this like thing, and having no idea how it was going to happen, you know, what was going to happen. I mean, I was one of the people that dismissed Twitter as a complete and utter waste of time. Update your status in 140 characters or less. You fucking do, like. Do you mean, what's the point of that? And it has been a feature in overthrowing governments. Do you know? Twitter, I mean, because people were able to have a conversation, however short, they were able to have a conversation where before they couldn't. It's very interesting that Twitter now has filters that it can stop particular messages being propagated in country by country basis. So if you were doing something, if you were tweeting things that were not appropriate for, say, Iran, which the list is long, they can stop those. And it's interesting how quickly they were prepared to take the money, you know, and make that happen. I mean, it's all very well to say it's great now because there's a law in France against, you know, hate speech and saying nasty things about Jews and Muslims and whatever, and now Twitter can stop that, which is of course a good thing. But it also means now that in Saudi Arabia, any talk of democracy, you know, can be just stopped. The Saudi government is a major shareholder now in Twitter, which was very clever of them. Do you mean? Country by country, Twitter was certainly an instrument of reform. And God knows Saudi Arabia was in need of a bit of it. And by basically buying Twitter, you know, they've been able to solve that problem. Which actually comes to a point that isn't on the slide at all. In the US, for example, there's a huge tradition of free speech hard-coded into the Constitution. And they have big debates about how much is to be allowed and how much isn't. But it was written at a time when there was the press, and the idea was that the government couldn't stop the press from, couldn't stop the press from publishing. The press was free. There's been a lot of debate about, you know, if you're blogging, do you have the same protections as the New York Times? You know? But also, that free speech tradition only stopped the government from saying what and what can't be published. But increasingly, the people that control the visibility of ideas are private companies. So, let's say you are, let's say, for example, that things happened in a different order, okay? And we got the World Wide Web before the Americans got, say, you know, civil rights. So they had the web in the 1960s, right? And let's say, let's say Martin Luther King, you know, has just been shot, but now you want to campaign for gay rights, okay? How, and let's say people aren't interested. Do you mean? That's disgusting. You know, people aren't interested in gay people having any rights or any kind of equality. While the First Amendment would have prevented the government from stopping you from publishing a newspaper, it says nothing about Google making you just invisible. Do you know? So if you have a campaign for, you know, equal rights for people and it's not popular, then, you know, Google might decide, well, you know, we want to piss people off, so we just hide that. I mean, you can these days you can have a website all you want, and people can find it. But like if they can't find it on Google, you don't exist. You know. And similarly, you know, if you were banned from Facebook for life for posting inappropriate content that gay people should have the same rights as everyone else. I mean, that's your platform gone then. And so while laws and the American Constitution protected people from the government, it's not even the government anymore that has the power. Like Facebook and Google have control now over what ideas can be out there. And in fairness to them, they're doing a very good job. So, if you're the Prime Minister of France and, there's a website that you don't like because it embarrasses you, and you phone up Google and say, can you, rank that maybe, 10 pages in, they'll tell you to fuck off, But who's to say the government of China won't buy Google tomorrow? And Tibet may as well not exist. Just Google Tibet and it won't even show up as a concept. So there's been a shift of protections, I guess, from the government, but no one foresaw protecting us from private enterprise and having private enterprise be the arbiters of what's acceptable and what's not. Just this dynamically generated content here was just about these content management systems and whatever, so it's kind of boring now given the direction this conversation was taken. And then we have the idea of walled gardens as well then, where in the early days of the web, first of all, the internet and the web are not the same. The web is a thing running on the internet, but there's still other things running on the internet. Email is separate from the web. The web is just anything. I thought it was cool, but I wasn't quite sure it would take off myself. Which again shows how much I know. But you put up a website and anybody could come to it. And it was open. But increasingly now we have like walled gardens where you go onto Facebook and you do things in Facebook. And you send a message from one Facebook person to another Facebook person, and all of that's happening inside Facebook. And I think it's a bit like, the rules of what happens when you're walking down the street are very different. Like the guards have authority, over you everywhere. But if you're walking down, the West Mall in Wilton Shopping Centre, one of the mall cops can throw you out. You're in the mall, and mall rules apply, and the mall cop can do whatever he wants. And to some extent, Facebook is a bit like that, and all this stuff is happening inside Facebook land. And increasingly, you see Facebook almost becoming the web. I mean, when I was looking for companies that, for the Google Online Marketing Challenge, there was one crowd that had done birthday cake for my wife. And so I was looking, they had done birthday cake for someone else, I was looking for a cake for my wife. And so I Googled them and I found the website. When I got to the website, it was gone. And then I found them on Facebook. And they had decided not just to get rid of the website altogether and only be on Facebook. And increasingly, you see more of that. First of all, it's cheaper, it's easier, but also they can, get their likes and see who's coming and whatnot. So that's kind of connected to the previous point about who has the, who's in charge of the web and who can make things disappear. There's the privacy issue then is just huge. Once you're logged into Google, I mean, I said it a few times, and I wasn't being metaphorical. Like Google literally has a list of everything you've ever searched. Like it actually has a list, and so it can tell an awful lot about you. And it's only doing that in order to in order to serve up your ads better. You know? If you're interested in, you know, bikes, it's going to get you bike ads. I mean, all your Gmails are scanned. Like if you have pick some topic that you have no interest in, that you've never done anything about, send a couple of Gmails to one of your buddies about that topic, and fairly soon you start to see ads about that. You know, so, and again, when things were controlled by the state, we had protections against the state interfering in our lives. So there were rules about who could open your post. Do you know what I mean? If the police wanted to open your post, they'd have had to go to court and, you know, explain to a judge why they needed to see inside your post. Whereas now you have, you know, Google bots automatically scanning every email you send, and there's no, you know, there's no protections in that. We've given up a lot of things for these free services. Someone said something once, and it was very, very true. He said, if you're not paying for something on the internet, you're not a customer, you're the product. You know? And like, you know, you're not a customer of Facebook. You're Facebook's product. What it knows about you is what it's selling. You know, so that raises some interesting, you know, concerns. Even things like, I think some of these issues are things that people aren't even aware of, and so there's no great groundswell of horror to try and change them. I mean, the fact that the location of your phone is logged every 30 seconds or so while it's turned on, and so it wouldn't be very difficult for someone to find out where you've been all the time for the past, you know, so many months. That's actually quite horrific, but people aren't bothered. I wonder, someone my age is horrified by that, and I don't know, are younger people just don't care, or they don't know, or they just have surrendered to the inevitable? I'm not sure. Is it disinterest or just an acceptance, or what? You know. See, we're very lucky in that we live in a very free society, but I'm not very old, and I remember a time when it was against the law to buy condoms without a prescription in a pharmacy, and there were some doctors that wouldn't even give a prescription because, like, you know, you're going to be holding around like. It's not that long ago. I mean, you remember David Norris running for president? He became well known, and Mary Robinson became well known because she was his lawyer when he sued the state to overturn the laws that made homosexuality illegal. It's not that long ago in Ireland that it was against the law to be gay. If things happened in different orders, right, and everybody had mobile phones back then, I mean, if you were gay and the police could know where your phone was every 30 seconds for the past 18 months, Jesus, like, your life would have been miserable. Because you can see who else's phone, you know, or you could see who's friends who's on Facebook, you know. So it's easy to become too relaxed because we're actually very lucky where we live. But it's only in places where people aren't so lucky, like Iran and China or whatever, that these issues become apparent. I was going to show you a thing. Well, it's kind of related, but it's just a technical thing. It's not nearly as interesting. There was a time when you like built a website and there it was and it was up, and you know, that was all you did. And like I was saying with Google Analytics, now you're tracking and seeing who's doing what. You can get a lot of feedback as people are wandering around the web. You know, one by one isn't kind of interesting also. But you know, when you've thousands, you can get some information about things, and you can start modifying your product or your services to suit what people want. I just want to show you this here, which is kind of interesting. So this is a video I made just about, you know, the Teaching Naked video I made, which, but here in Google and YouTube, you probably haven't even seen this on YouTube, but you have access to it, just probably never bothered to look. You can see here by seconds really how many people stayed watching. So this had such and such a number of views, right? But by 38 seconds in, half the people that started this video are gone. So can you can imagine if this was one of the classes that I had online, right? I would like to think that I hadn't lost half the people, you know, 38 seconds in. I mean, I think the reason this drops off so quickly is that anything with naked in the title is probably going to get loads of hits. And then people realize actually there's no naked people in this YouTube video. And so, you know, obviously quite a lot of people are a bit slow. It takes them a whole minute to figure that out. But that's why it trails off very quickly. Interestingly here, it goes up. And that's because that suggests that people have been rewinding that particular portion. So you could see if this was a class, right, and there was a spike like that where it went up again, that would mean that a lot of people had actually gone back and played back that part again. So that as a lecturer, that would tell me that either that was a difficult point that people needed to hear, you know, explained a few times, or it could have been, you know, a blooper or something, you know, where I said something funny by accident and, you know, it gone viral or whatever. But I'm saying you can get all of the trails that people are leaving behind them can add up to quite a lot. And this is what's going on everywhere. You know, people collecting information about your habits and your behaviors so that they can mostly just try and sell you stuff. You know, but there's all these trails being left that can provide you some information. No, it's any questions in any of it. So just kind of some thoughts that I wanted to wrap up with. Because there's more to this than, you know, the technology. And there are lots of questions that haven't been answered yet. And it may be up to you guys to figure out what the answers are. Any questions, thoughts, comments? Go and sit. Leave it there.